Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into the work of a true master of provocation, H.L. Mencken. We're going to take apart his rhetorical toolkit to see how sometimes the way you say something can be way more powerful than what you're actually saying. All right, let's get right into it with a huge question in political science, something that feels, totally fundamental. You've got direct democracy, where people vote on laws themselves. And then you have representative democracy, where we elect people to do that for us. Seems like a pretty basic, super important difference, right? But what if that whole distinction, the one they teach you in every civics class, was just, well, an illusion? What if it was just a clever trick of language meant to hide what's really going on? Well, that was the big, bold claim from the journalist and satirist H.L. Mencken. Now, for this explainer, we're not going to get into a debate about whether he was right or wrong. Nope. Instead, we're going to dig into how he made his argument so darn compelling. We're using his writing as a case study in the pure art of persuasion. Okay, so let's start with Mencken's main target, this whole idea that there's any real, meaningful difference between those two types of democracy. He basically sets out to prove that when the rubber hits the road, they both lead to the exact same place. So he had a very specific mission. He was writing for people who were already kind of skeptical about politics, already doubting the wisdom of the average voter. His goal was to convince them that the systems we've built are just as shaky. He had to tear down a core political idea, and he had to make it look effortless. So how in the world did he pull that off? Well, Mencken's weapon of choice, his primary tool for this demolition job, was the power of analogy. He didn't bore you with dry academic arguments. No, he used these really vivid, concrete comparisons that made his point feel like just plain common sense. And, analogies are just so powerful, right? Because they take a concept that might be a little complex or unfamiliar, like political theory, and they map it onto something we already get. It makes the whole thing feel less like a lecture and more like something you knew all along. Okay, check out his first big analogy. He compares the myth of the classic town meeting, where everyone supposedly has an equal say, to the old, debunked myth that folk ballads were just written by the folk. He says, look, we now know that those ballads were actually written by specific individual poets. The folk just kind of acted as judges, picking the hits. And he argues the town meeting works the exact same way. A few loud, dominant people always take the lead, and everybody else just kind of follows along. And then he totally flips the script with another incredible analogy. He argues that even the most powerful king in history was never truly absolute, right? He was always held in check by his advisors, his army, his court. And in the same way, Mencken says the so-called sovereign citizen in a democracy is also hemmed in. And the effect is brilliant. It just shrinks the gap between a democracy and an autocracy until the difference feels almost meaningless. But his argument wasn't just about these clever comparisons. Oh no, it was all about the persona, the character he played. He comes across as this world-weary realist, this guy who's seen it all, who's seen through all the political games, and is now just reporting the facts with this dry, almost amused sense of contempt. He was a master at shifting between three totally distinct voices, sometimes in the very same sentence, just to control how you, the reader, saw things. It's this incredible rhetorical juggling act. He's informing you, insulting his enemies, and being deeply ironic, all at the same time. So first up, you've got voice number one, the political scientist. He puts on his professor hat. He uses this formal academic language to lay things out. And that makes him sound super authoritative, totally knowledgeable, like he's just giving you the objective facts. But then, in a blink, he'll switch to voice number two, the scornful critic. And here, the language is just pure contempt. He doesn't bother with counterarguments. He just dismisses his opponents with these sharp, nasty insults that basically call them either crooks or complete idiots. It's like a verbal sledgehammer. And then there's his third, and maybe his most devastating voice, the ironic realist. This is where he pretends to agree with you. He'll say something like, sure, the people might make a good choice, but then he just buries that little concession under a mountain of sarcasm, under the hand of God, by some miracle. He completely guts it of any real meaning until the idea of it actually happening sounds totally ridiculous. His word choice was also just surgically precise. Take his use of the word Camorra. Now, that was the name for an Italian secret society, basically a crime syndicate. And he uses it to describe political groups. See what he's doing? It's not just a random insult. It's a strategic move to wrap them in this air of a criminal conspiracy, subtly suggesting all politics is just a form of organized crime. And then you get a phrase like stall-fed Rousseau's. I mean, wow, it's a masterclass in contempt. Stall-fed makes his opponent sound like fattened-up cattle in a barn ready for slaughter. And calling them Rousseau's reduces this great philosopher to just some common interchangeable farm animal. It is an absolute intellectual knockout punch in just 3 words.
So it wasn't just what Mencken said, or even the words he chose. It was the music of his writing, the very rhythm and structure of his sentences. He conducted his arguments like a symphony, controlling the tempo to build you up to this massive, powerful conclusion. One of his go-to moves was the long, cumulative sentence. Just listen to how this one builds. He keeps adding clause after clause, patiently explaining what his opponent supposedly thinks. And he's just pulling you along, building this tension. It builds and it builds until you're just waiting for the release. And then, bam, after that long, winding setup, he hits you with a short, sharp, declarative punchline like this one. The whole structure is pure theater. That long sentence sets the stage, and the short one delivers the knockout blow. It's designed to make his final point feel like a simple, undeniable truth. Let's just do a quick close reading of this one sentence because it's like a perfect miniature of his entire style. This is the heart of his analogy, comparing democracy to those old folk ballads we talked about. Okay, so it starts with in point of fact. That's his trigger phrase. It's like a signal flare. He's warning you, hey, that comfortable myth you believe in, I'm about to smash it with some cold, hard reality. And then you get concrete poets. The word concrete here is just brilliant. It's the total opposite of the fuzzy romantic idea of the folk. It insists on real individual people doing the work. With just that one word, he dismantles the entire myth of collective creation, which of course is the whole point of his analogy for democracy. So, why are we spending all this time deconstructing a century-old argument from a famous grump? Why does this matter today? Well, because the techniques he perfected are, if anything, more relevant now than ever before. Look, understanding these tools, the power of a good analogy, the manipulation of tone, the rhythm of a sentence, it's absolutely crucial for getting by in our modern world of political talk. You see these exact same techniques everywhere, on cable news, in viral social media posts, and it all forces us to ask a really critical question. When we find ourselves being persuaded, are we actually responding to the facts? Or are we just getting swept away by a really good performance? It's a challenge to all of us to listen differently, to listen not just to what's being said, but to pay very close attention to how.